What's going on, coin traders? Thanks for joining me for the show. We're looking at AVAX, Avalanche AVAX on that ticker. Obviously not the best setup right now, especially after pulling back and breaking this daily structure. So one of the big things to note too is that if we actually turn off the 50 period EMA, you can see that ever since we did have our initial run up from the middle of October, we're actually finding very nice support on this zone in between the 12 and 26 period exponential moving averages. So obviously once we had this very nice let's go ahead and clear this up for a second. Once we had this very nice explosive move out of this consolidation point, we ran up, had a pretty big air gap until finally back testing the 12 period EMA, ran up, currently set our trend high right now at a high of the $50 psychological, before ultimately pulling back and finding support on this 26, which was actually the first test of the support ever since finding it as initial resistance here back on the 16th of October. So now we have lost the actual uptrend guidance from the exponential moving averages. If we do zoom in, we're looking at kind of a bounce attempt right now, but ultimately we are looking at a bearish cross right now between the 12 and 26 period EMAs. So if we go ahead and turn the 50 back on, you can see we are looking at the 50 being a little bit more of that supportive point. And so if we actually flip over into the 2-day chart, we will get a little bit more support here on the 26 period EMA. So that's pretty much what we're currently following right now. If we do lose that, then we would be looking down at the 50 period EMA on this 2-day chart. Right now, that would correlate to a price of 28.43. So pretty significant pullback, but obviously we're not expecting price just to fall immediately. So if we do see prices kind of stabilizing or coming down, we would expect a run up, probably around the $30 level at most if we do get continuous pressure to the downside. So right now, coming off the current trend high at 50, looking at about a 30% pullback or so. But like we said, still finding support on top of this 26 period EMA. And so right now, until we actually break this, we are looking at several attempts. So it still is maintaining relevancy in terms of holding support here on this chart. Now, unfortunately, if we actually look at the 2-day candles as well, we can see that the bearish candles are actually engulfing the bullish candles. So not necessarily the best sign in terms of a lot of the buying pressure coming in. And so if we actually want to go ahead and look at volume here on this chart, the biggest amount of peak volume has already come in. In fact, on this 2-day chart, we're looking at the 11th of December candle, which is interesting because it was actually a spinning top doji type candle. Obviously, a little bit more of that continuation coming in. So equal amount of selling pressure as buying pressure indicated by the upper wick and the lower shadow. So seeing this run up, yet seeing decreasing volume on this chart on this 2-day is kind of one of those signs that we typically see. And probably if we pull up the RSI here, you can see how we didn't actually get a new higher high. So if we actually flip over into the daily chart now and talk about the the relative strength index, you can see just like we were talking about, actually got a lower high on the current trend high right now, but especially after we did get our peak volume coming in for this block. So we have been seeing an overall pull down and tapering off and cool down. But the good thing about this chart setup actually is that if we do look at the RSI on this daily, you can see that currently where we're at isn't too much different from where we actually found our low, which was right around the middle of October before we found our initial run up. So based on this chart, we know that the RSI is at a potential level where we could actually see the next big run up and leg. Whether or not that happens, we actually still have a lot of cooling down to do on the rest of the crypto markets. But one of the things that is significant too on this chart is just the observation that we are seeing a pretty much decrease of all selling pressure as well on this pullback. So not necessarily continuing strength on this pullback. And in fact, we actually don't have as strong of a pullback as we did as a rally on the upside. So for example, if we actually look at the bullish moves here down at the bottom, we were looking at multiple times where we saw consecutive bullish days and multiple chunks of green bullish days on this candle. Whereas if we actually look at the bearish times when we see pulling back from this $50 price point, we only see a couple of times where we actually saw the bearish volume and the bearish bars only be about 3 consecutive days before we actually saw some bullish input. So what that's really saying is there's not a lot of long-term force and sustainability on this overall move. So does that mean that we can't go lower? Absolutely not. And one of the things that I do want to do is actually pull up a Fibonacci retracement from the low coming off 871 up to the current trend high right now, right at that $50 psychological level. So what we're looking at is the 38.2% being right around 34.19. And as you can see, we've pretty much already smashed that when we did find support on this daily 50 period EMA. But right now, we're actually still maintaining prices above the 38.2% retracement. And when we do find prices that stabilize and find 38.2 as a pretty nice point of support, we know that that's a very strong sign to actually allow consolidation and potential accumulation for the next leg to the upside. If we actually lose this, it's a lot more likely that we'll go into longer term weekly consolidation, and likely seeing a new run up to a new trend high isn't as likely in the near term future. So that's kind of one of the reasons why we do focus on these levels for Fibonacci so much. But realistically, we could also see a very nice healthy correction down to 61.8, which would be at 24.46. It sounds like a lot, and it is, and that's actually a 50% pullback from where we saw our trend high coming in. But we do know that that is a normal level for crypto to pull back to. And especially if we actually look at where we topped out on this trend back in the middle of November, you can see big price points. So that's a relevant technical level as well. So if we do see that next leg to the downside, we could be looking at that probably realistically is the worst downside and worst down case scenario, especially given the fact that we have very minimal bearish pressure continuing to come in. And we already have seen about a 30% correction and sell-off so far from the trend high here. So now flipping into the weekly, we can actually see right now, based off of this weekly, just what we were talking about with volume. So peak volumes already come in, especially now looking at the trend high, you can see how minimal it was and how it wasn't even the peak. But like we talk about with decreasing selling pressure, look how minimal these bearish weeks are in terms of this overall sell-off. So especially now, we had very minimal pullback and sell-off volume coming in. Right now, we still have about 2 days left, so it's possible to think we could get a little bit more upside, but we know we're definitely not going to get as much as we have seen on the initial run-up. But on this weekly chart, still a very good thing, because this is set up really nice here, and especially because right now, we've got a full bullish cross and formation on these weekly exponential moving averages, where we have the 12 period on top, the 26 now in the middle, and then the 50 period writing on the bottom. Very good sign, especially after getting tight, having this very nice bullish cross and close. So right now we're looking at a very nice setup where we actually do typically and always need to see a backtest retracement confirm supports, and then usually that does kick off the next stage or leg. Ultimately, at a very worst case scenario though, we would be looking at a potential consolidation mark, which still would be very essential, especially if these exponential moving averages roll up and we see a kickoff touch of support in that instance without further pullback in price. That's usually one of the most bullish signs in order to get a back test and confirmation of EMAs, is to actually have the price stay flat and allow the EMAs to roll up and hit the price. So now on the weekly, want to look at the technical support levels, because on the downside, looking at 28.54, below that would be about 21, and right around the $23 level, which is where we found our 61.8. So those are the extreme case scenarios too. On a pullback right now, we would see the EMAs probably align with the level right around 28.50 or so. But at a worst case scenario, if we do lose that, then we would be looking extremely strong from that zone. That's about 21 to 23. So I wouldn't expect prices to go any lower than that. And right now, still looking very good, though, to be able to maintain 28. So even if we do look at a pullback from that level, still about 40%, very healthy correction for crypto. Sounds like a lot, and it definitely is. Obviously, it's more fun to have it go up, but we know that crypto does have these big moves, which are big upside moves, which also pair with the big downside moves as well. So nothing to quite stress about. And actually, along that line, did want to go ahead and flip over here to Twitter or X and talk about a tweet that I made earlier, that we're still at the stage of the market where you shouldn't worry too much about price and just worry about accumulating. You'll feel better looking at the amount of crypto in your position size than looking at the portfolio balance and dips are for buying. So if you're not currently following me over on Twitter, at coin_trades is the handle. Looking forward to chatting with everyone over there. And essentially what we mean by this is that right now we are still coming off of the low stage of the crypto market. So don't look at price yet, because most likely no one's going to get ready to sell, since we're just about to start the next leg of this bull cycle. So keep worrying about accumulating, and it will help you feel better on these pullbacks. So just accumulate, accumulate, accumulate. And that's the balance and number that you should really be looking at, especially after seeing a chart like this, especially having a breakout. So we know retracements are normal. We've talked about it plenty of times over on Twitter or X. So we have been anticipating and expecting it. And so that's why right now we do eye these downside supports, because as we expect pullbacks and retracements, we know pretty much what to expect at a worst case scenario and what potential likely scenarios are when we do see downside pullbacks. Switching over here into the 4-hour chart before we wrap up, looking like we are starting to form a little bit of a bear flag. So potentially we would be looking at from this high down to the low, scouting that as a potential breakout. And that's how we would actually see alignment with a lot of our targets that we had looked at as well. So multiple reasons why we're looking at this level, pretty much right around 25, as a potential worst case downside scenario for Avalanche AVAX. Right now, though, we actually are still in a shorter term uptrend, but like we talk about, we do look at volume down here. So on the shorter term, still seeing a lot of selling pressure and not a lot of follow through for bulls, but we are still seeing higher highs and higher lows come in. So as long as we can keep seeing that level maintain, as right now we're looking at scouting a close on top of 34. So if we can find a rally here soon to top out a new price high above the $40 level, then that would be one of the nice bullish things to let us know that this is going to be our trend low and that likely we are going to start to scout a pathway towards some of these upper resistances and the current trend high right now. Ideally for this shorter term, especially since we have held this bottom level of support, right now we're trying to stair step up a little bit. So on this retracement, we actually found a bottom, found resistance at the 35.12 line, pulled back, reclaimed both of those, and then found support once again above 34.15, just like we found on this initial bounce and movement before finding our current trend low right now at 31.17. So if we can maintain support right now on top of 35.12, very good case and reason to think that we could be seeing higher. And that's another reason why it is so important to be able to knock out this $40 level with a close, especially getting some nice bullish volume here down on the bottom. Otherwise, we will be looking for a lower high and then probably retesting 34.15 before ultimately testing our trend low right now around the $30 line. And so with that, that actually is going to go ahead and wrap up our show and updates on potential scenarios and what we're expecting in the coming days for Avalanche AVAX. Hope you all enjoyed the show. If you did, please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe if you have not done so just yet. As always, post your questions, comments, issues, disagreements down in the comment sections below. I always do love getting back to each and every one of you. That is it for now, though, so stay safe, take care, and I'll catch you back in the next video.